Okay, it is a Sunday, the day after I rode this or videotaped me riding that for the first time. And I'm here working on a Husqvarna 40 chainsaw. Now, somebody that I work with during the week, who also drives one of those, asked me to take a look at his chainsaw because it doesn't seem to want to run. So I said, all right. I decided to take the camera out and sort of show me the process that I go through on going through these little two-stroke engines. I plan to do more of this style of video. I either have started doing that or you will start seeing them work because I have a thing for fixing tractors and selling them. I have done a bunch of chainsaws and weed whackers. I prefer to stay away from these small two-stroke things, but sometimes I run into deals that are too good to pass up, so I end up picking up like 5 at a time and then sell them. So anyways, the first thing I am gonna do is take this top cover off. To be fair, I've already done that, but I popped it back on there real quick so I could sort of start the video, but there's just a screw that holds it on the top, and on this chainsaw, the whole thing just kind of lifts up and out of the way. So this particular chainsaw doesn't have a primer, it has a choke. The choke operates, or seems to operate normally. It moves the lever. The throttle does seem to move the throttle level like it's supposed to. The stop switch seems to operate normally. The first thing I checked before I did anything is if it has fuel. There is no fuel, so maybe that might be what's wrong with it. I don't know. AKA like somebody tried to start it and didn't have fuel in it. The problems with this chainsaw suggested that the carburetor was gummed up. Supposedly it was used by a relative of the person who owns this chainsaw, and they left fuel in it for a while and then it wouldn't run after that. And it would do the classic symptoms of plugged up carburetor. You know, it kind of cough at you, and you know, that was it. But first thing that I also noted as soon as I took the cover off is there's this fuel line kind of just dangling in midair in there. Somebody has been in there before and kind of messed with it because it's all kinked up, crushed and whatnot. It kind of looks like somebody grabbed it with pliers and pulled on it. Poking around in and around the carburetor that's back here, I can't see where that fuel line would get hooked up to the carburetor. There is, however, a spot for the carburetor to get plugged into right here, but as far as I can tell, there's nowhere that I could see visually now where that fuel line would go onto the carburetor. So on this model, this might just be a breather for the fuel tank. I don't know yet. Usually these small two-stroke engines have 2 fuel lines that go to the tank, and that is just how the system works. They seem to pressurize the fuel tank and push the fuel up into the carburetor, something like that, but that's my initial thought was that that fuel line was one of those and it was just missing. But I right now can't see where that other fuel line would go. So I'm gonna have to dig further at some point. But anyways, the first thing I'm gonna do now is take the spark plug out and check that I at least have spark, so that I know if I try to start it, I'm getting ignition, so I don't have to worry about that, and it's just I have to worry about if is it getting fuel and air. Air cleaner is right over there. It appears clean. There wasn't any buildup on it. There's nothing blocking the air hole here or the opening of the carburetor, so it's getting air. The only thing that's in question apparently is fuel, assuming, of course, that it does have ignition. All right, I've sort of changed your angle a little bit to give myself more room to actually work on the thing, but all I'm going to do is take the spark plug out of the top Boot felt nice, didn't feel anything weird on there. Should have checked that first. I have the wrong size spark plug socket. I got the right size socket. And alright. Spark plug was definitely tight, so I shouldn't have had any compression leaks. Spark plug wasn't broken. It's very wet, suggesting that it was flooded at some point. So hopefully the camera will focus on that. But you can see a bunch of wetness on the threads there. The tip is pretty dry though. It's pretty black though. That's not uncommon for small two-stroke stuff though, because of the way they operate. They run really, really rich and then lean out once they warm up to an optimal fuel mixture. But the tip of the spark plug is definitely very wet around the threads and whatnot. So that kind of suggests that it was flooded at some point and wouldn't fire. But I want to check my spark first. Who knows, with the spark plug looking that wet, maybe it didn't have spark for some reason. That's why it wasn't running. So all I did is pop the spark plug back in the boot. I'm going to hold it up against something that would be grounded to the engine block or touching the engine block, and I should see spark, assuming that the switch isn't stuck in like the grounded position. So I do have spark. I'm going to check that the kill switch functions. So if I flip it this way, it should kill spark. And it doesn't. And I can already see why, actually. So on any small engine like this or whatnot, or even if you wanted to kill a big engine, you could ground the coil, I guess. But anyways, definitely on any small engine, the kill switch just grounds the coil out to the engine block. So electricity will just follow the path of resistance. If there's no ground to the engine block, the path of least resistance ends up sending the energy up through the spark plug and then making it jump the spark plug gap. When you kill this kill switch, all it does is ground the coil out to the engine block, so now the path of least resistance is following that path to the engine block and the spark just goes nowhere. So right now what's happening is the kill switch just isn't hooked up. There's a broken wire down in here. So basically the kill switch just does not have any function. So if you flip the switch into stop, normally the juice would come up this wire, go back down that one. But because the wire is broken, of course, that can't happen. So for running functions, it still has spark, so that wouldn't be a problem. But if you went to try and kill it, it wouldn't die. It would just keep going. So that would be something is something I'm gonna have to fix before I give it back to the person who owns this. All right, so I popped the spark plug back in, tightened it down where it feels good. These engines are aluminum, so you don't want to tighten it down too much. You just got to give it a nice, light, snug, and you'll sort of feel when it feels right. I'm just going to check compression. Definitely got good compression. If I felt nothing when I pulled this, either the recoil is broken in here and just not spinning the engine at all, or if that was working, if you could see the flywheel is turning, that would suggest that the engine is completely blown out and worn out. It does not have any compression. This engine, however, definitely has plenty of compression. So it passed that test. So should be just fuel related for some reason. So what I'm going to do is mix up a little bottle of a premix and just feed it directly into the end of the carburetor and see if I can get it to pop at me. Alright, so what I have here is the chainsaw and a bottle of about 40 to 1 mix. I'm just going to take it, squirt it down into the carburetor, straight down its throat, or straight down the throat of the carburetor, whatever, and see if it'll fart at me. So I proved that it would run. It didn't seem to sound bad, or I didn't sound choked up with that test. So what I'm going to actually do is go right to filling the fuel tank up with fuel and see if I can get it to crack over that way to see what it sounds like trying to suck fuel up through the fuel lines through the carburetor like you're supposed to. Right here I do have the magic liquid that I could shoot into there to get her to crack over easier to see what it sounds like if she won't fire just going direct. One thing I noticed is the recoil must have a missing tooth or something on it, because every couple turns it would all of a sudden be nothing there. I had to sort of play with it and then it would catch again and I could crank it a few more times. But it seems like it's fine, aside from, you know, maybe having a plugged up carburetor a little bit or something, or broken fuel line potentially, so we'll see. Okay, I have an arsenal of tools out there. Obviously the chainsaw itself filled all the way up. I noted no leaks out of the tank itself. There's a bottle filled with 40-1 that I can try and feed directly down its neck again, and if nothing else, I have the magic juice that I could squirt down its throat and make it crack. Initially, I'm just going to pull the choke and see if it'll fire up all on its own. Upon closer inspection of it starting, it seems like the carburetor might just be really out of adjustment. So I'm going to take a look to see what the screws are set at and compare that to what it approximately should be. The carburetor settings on most of these little two-stroke engines is about the same, so I'm just going to turn the screws in, count how many turns it is to be fully seated, and see where we're at, basically. So on this chainsaw, the needle mixture, fuel air mixture screws are here. This chainsaw is nice in the fact that there's an access hole on the side that you can go in and turn it. There is one marked H for high and one for L for low, and there is one down here on the bottom for idle. It's marked T for some reason. I guess throttle, I don't know. But I'm just gonna go ahead, turn them all in, count how many turns, and then compare to what it should be. It's usually about a turn and a half on each needle mixture screw, and then the throttle, I don't know, gotta back that off until it idles low enough where the chain's not spinning at idle, but high enough where it doesn't want to just always die at idle. So yeah, just gotta kind of play with that one, and we'll go from there. It seems like it might just be a mixture setting problem and maybe an idle setting problem, because it seemed to want to run better if I plugged up the carburetor opening a bit, and it just seemed to like idle idle really high. Now, me covering the carburetor opening on a small 2-stroke engine like that, or even like a bigger 4-stroke engine, all you're kind of doing is testing to see if a different air-fuel mixture ratio improves or improves the way it runs. By closing off some of the air, you're making it run much richer, because now it's forced to suck more fuel through and there's less air in each cycle. So it runs a lot richer, and if that helps, that means for some reason it's running really lean, which could suggest the carburetor, or it could be the mixture is way off. If you partially cover the carburetor opening and nothing happens, or it runs worse, then that means, then that would mean that it's running fine and there's something else, wrong in the system. All you're doing is checking to see if it, is getting enough fuel. If you close that hole off and it runs worse, then that means it's getting enough fuel, and that maybe there's a problem with the air filter getting blocked up and not allowing it to suck enough air, because right now it's completely open. It could suck as much air as it needs to. I used a long, skinny screwdriver to go in through the access hole and turn the mixture screws in all the way and count how many turns it took there, and then back them back out to where they're supposed to be. And they actually, the high and low speed were actually about right. I don't know what the throttle screw or where that has to be, but because it ran better when I plugged, not completely plugged, but covered partially the opening in the carburetor for the air right here, and the mixture needles are actually still set about where they should be, then that means for some reason it's not getting enough fuel, aka clogged carburetor. So I'm going to go ahead, take the carburetor out, and then have to disassemble that to clean it out, and then put it all back together, and hopefully it'll fire up, and I can potentially get a view of where this mystery fuel line is supposed to go. This little opening right here is most definitely where this end of it should go, because I can see fuel bubbling out of there every now and then. The other end of it is a mystery. I can't see where it goes, so if I disassemble it, maybe I'll see where that's supposed to go, or it's just a breather for some reason. Hopefully I can get at the carburetor without having to move the handle. It seems like I should be able to, but I might end up having to disassemble more than I want to. Okay, and we're back. I needed to charge you a little bit. You died on me. So I let it charge for probably about an hour, or let you charge for about an hour, and then did a couple things on the Odyssey that I could poke around at. But now I'm back here. I'm just going to disassemble the carburetor gently. You got to be careful about these gaskets because I don't have a rebuild kit for this carburetor. And if I don't need one, I don't need one. But if a gasket gets ripped, or is ripped, or there's a diaphragm ripped, then I need to get a rebuild kit. But usually, if you're careful, you can take them apart gently enough where you can get away without a rebuild kit. I've had good luck with that, especially if it's a Walbro carburetor. Those are built a bit better than the Chinese knockoff carburetors that you'll find in like a Ryobi or some other cheaper brand of two-stroke engine or whatever. This being a Husky, it's a little bit higher quality, so it still has a Walbro carburetor, but I digress. I'm just going to take her apart. Now, you don't necessarily do spray cleaning this way. Spray cleaning will get into the gaskets and no, if you have a kit, spray clean, you're going to place it on the but you're only clean up, don't spray clean, just spray the gaskets. Okay, so I lifted off all of the gaskets on the other side. It started to separate a hair right there, but not too bad. I've done worse and had it still work. Flipped it around and took the other cover off, and I believe I've mostly found the problem. There was a bunch of gunk right in this screen, right in there. Probably that black mass right there is just a big pile of gunk behind that screen. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's the problem here, tentatively, of course, without, actually having really cleaned it, just sort of taking it apart and seeing what's what. But my experience tells me that that's probably why it's not running right. So this solution right there is what's in the parts washer away back over there. It's a what used to be Zep cleaning solution. It's called something else now, but it's the same company that just got bought out. It works really good. It seems to be less damaging to gaskets. I probably wouldn't take this gasket and soak it in that, but it's oilier. It's more oily than brake clean or carb cleaner, which doesn't really have any oil in it. It's just completely a solvent. That's a solvent, but it's much oilier, so it actually can rejuvenate, or it seems to rejuvenate gaskets a little bit and make them still usable. If you use straight brake clean or carb cleaner, that's when you're drying shit out and you might as well just replace it. But I'm gonna go ahead. At this point, the only thing left to take apart in here is the needle and the seat setup under there. Then at that point, I'll take brake clean and squirt it through all of the passageways. Oh, and then you can remove the mixture needle screws out of the carburetor at that point too. Just make sure you know how many turns from all the way in it is out, so you know how to set it back, so you can get kind of an approximate setting initially. Okay, so all I did is take some brake clean and squirted it through all of the passageways. I was comfortable enough leaving the needle mixture screws in, meaning I was comfortable enough that I didn't need to remove them to clean it out, because all of the gunk was pretty much built up through the main inlet of the carburetor behind the screen. So I'm going to put it back together. Putting it back together is just the reverse of taking it apart. So I'm going to zoom you out a hair and get to it. Okay. These line springs that the unit use are really, you get the right spot. Put it back there. It's up tries. You crack down these little bit of olive oil, so see parting to right work, so you need to know it. So hopefully you know it's crack down the has no movement on it. Or run, that's fine, but it's together. Before I put this cover on, I'm going to make note that if you buy a carb rebuild kit for one of these carburetors, especially if it's a Walbro carburetor, there's a Welch plug that you could pop out, and it'll have another screen under it, kind of like, well, you can't see it now, but it was over here, and that can get clogged. I have only come across the screen under here being a problem once in every one of these little carburetors I've taken apart. So if I put this back together and it still doesn't run, I would say, okay, I'm going to have to get a carb rebuild kit and pop out that Welch plug and clean out the screen that's under there. But I'm fairly confident that just cleaning out the carburetor like I did the trick. Putting these back together, they do have a certain order and a particular way they're supposed to go, but usually there's, you know, alignment pins on the gaskets and covers that more or less only allow you to put it together one way. And then like this plate could go more than one direction. You could pretty much put it any way you want. That isn't going to make a difference at all. Okay, so all of these parts need to get put together back at one. I'm probably going to stop the camera because it's going to take me a minute to get the throttle cable lined back up. They're always a pain in the ass, and you don't need to hear me cuss and swear at it, and you won't be able to see anything because my hands are going to be in here like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that I got to put this in there, then put this over the top of that, and then we'll be ready to fire it back up and see what happens. Okay, so it's completely reassembled again. I seem to have full function of everything. The choke works, or, you know, work like it did before. Throttle seems to have full throw. Nothing seized up or jammed anywhere. Still got compression. So there's still fuel in the tank. So I'm gonna take it back over yonder and see if she'll fire up like before, hopefully running like she's supposed to. So, as you can see, it does fire up and run. I had to shut the camera off and fiddle around with the throttle linkage. It was stuck before for some reason. I couldn't get it to fire run right with it like that, and I was for a while trying to tune it with the throttle basically stuck halfway open. It wasn't working, so I had to sort of start over fresh, so to say, and get it reset up right. And now it runs fine with the air cleaner off of it anyways. Before I put it all back together though, I'm going to fix the kill switch, because that's just kind of dangerous, even for just trying to tune it and fire it up over on the side there. Not having a way to kill it with a switch is kind of iffy, so I'm just going to put the wire back on there and we'll be good to go. So that extra fuel line that I found just kind of dangling in there, there is actually a way to route it inside of the chainsaw cover. So the line plugs into that hole, and then it has clips around this outside that clip into place. As far as I can tell, it's just a breather. It's a little bit different than a lot of the other small two-stroke engines that I've come across, but hey, if it works, it works. So I just hooked that back up and good to go there. I'm just going to take my cover, put it back on there. I crimped the wire back onto the kill switch, so I tested the spark, and it does kill the spark like it's supposed to now. So I'm just going to put that cover back on there, and then we'll fire it back up, do a final tuning, and close it out. So there you have it. This Husqvarna 40 is now completely operational. Fixed the kill switch, cleaned the carburetor out, had to tune it. The chain brake works. I don't think I cut it on camera, but I did test the chain brake. The chain brake does work. So it'll fire right up. So I can give it back to my coworker, and he could use it to cut whatever he needs to cut. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like the Facebook page. But most importantly, get out there and do something.